Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Split Cafe. Matt, we have a really juicy one today.
I mean, it's kind of like Law and Order SVU, right? Like, the Law and Order series, we're pulling straight from the headlines and we're talking about it,
Yeah,
right? And we got Dr. Weiner on, who obviously is going to be, the expert analysis or, give us the opinion of it. But tell us don't tease him anymore, Chris. Tell him what we're talking about today.
yeah. So everyone knows, or I'm sure everyone has heard Matthew Perry. It's been an ongoing thing for I want to say almost a year now, where he has passed, and the actual investigation of it has come to a conclusion, or getting to that point where they have made 5 different arrests now in connection with Perry's death. And as we all know, that it was an overdose of ketamine or toxic effects of ketamine. And we have Dr. Weiner here with us to break it down and understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And this is a really important topic, I think, like in this particular moment in time,
Mm-hmm.
based on not just Matthew Perry's death, but the regulatory environment surrounding it. So appreciate the opportunity to talk about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's where do you want to start? There's a lot to unpack here.
I mean, I'm just gonna put it out there. I think it's safe to say he was better off with his other friends than the friends that he was keeping now, and or towards the end of his life. Like, I know that's a kind of a
Yeah.
bad dad joke, but he should have kept his old friends, the new friends he had, you know. Should have
Yeah.
been like Drake and no new friends, but he just was rolling around with the wrong crowd, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. So for listeners who aren't familiar with what just recently broke in terms of the news, so we had heard that Matthew Perry had died from ketamine. Essentially, he had taken ketamine. He had gone unconscious while in a hot tub and ended up drowning. And there is some question about the circumstances around that because he had been going to an infusion clinic to get ketamine, which is legal to do, is prescribed off-label for a lot of mental health conditions, but the amount that was in his blood, this was the early toxicology report, the amount that was in his blood was a lot more than should have been there from the last time he was at that clinic. And so there was this question of, how did he get it? What was it? How much was it? What were how much is being monitored? And I actually wrote a bit about this at the time because I think that there's very lax oversight on the entire off-label ketamine industry right now, much to uh,
Yeah.
the detriment of public health, where you can even just order it through the mail right now, for example, and just have it sent right to
Wow.
your house. From I'm not going to name companies on here because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but there are companies that will just send it to you, with really strong promises for what it can do without necessarily good evidence to back that up. The
Mm-hmm.
infusion clinics actually are the only place where we do have some evidence, but that's a rabbit hole. We can go down that today if we want to. The issue with Matthew Perry, though, was that there was something else going on there, and what we found out right now was that what was going on was essentially I believe what the New York Times today reported is a ketamine distribution scheme where there were physicians involved, there were drug dealers involved. In Matthew Perry's case, in particular, there was an assistant as well who was injecting him apparently up to 6 to 8 times per day with ketamine. There was one physician who came to his house and gave him a very large dose that ended up causing him to essentially freeze up. And they just try to cover it up, just pretend that this isn't going on. And basically, what amounted to someone with an addiction going through a relapse. Someone who had been addicted to ketamine earlier in his life, and no one around him in that moment was there to take care of him. They wanted to take care of themselves. They wanted to protect
Yeah.
themselves by hiding it and by selling ketamine to him to make money off of him.
Yeah, there
Um,
was reports that I read the same article and we were kind of talking about it, but there was reports that he was paying like 55K a month just in
Wow.
just in ketamine, right? And so it goes back to what you were saying. I'm sure there was other people that inserted themselves into the process to where they were making money off of his addiction
Oh,
or this subscription or whatever you want to call it, right? There was definitely some people skimming off the top for, him
yeah,
facing
or
the demons that he was
actively
facing.
to or actively taking advantage of him. I
Yeah.
know. So I read an article yesterday And then there was another one that came out today, but in the one yesterday, they pulled text messages from some of these physicians, and one of them is on text saying, "Let's see how much this moron will pay." Like
I was just
literally,
reading that. That's crazy.
yeah, let's see how much this moron will pay. But and that's the sort of thing where in my opinion, the regulatory environment around ketamine is allowing a physician to do this, right?
Mm.
And part of what I was reflecting on yesterday was that for every Matthew Perry, I don't know if it's 10, 100, 1,000 people who aren't famous, who are
Yeah.
trapped in something like this, who might also be dying because of this, but we should never hear about it because they weren't on a TV show.
Yeah.
Um,
And
Yeah,
they're
but
not on syndication. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
not a
yeah.
celebrity.
Yeah.
So, the can you break down what I know you said that ketamine's used off label for a lot. What specifically was Matthew Perry, if it's known, what he was using it for and how it was helping his mental health? Because I know, like you had mentioned, he'd been in addiction quite a bit. I believe he was even on buprenorphine at the time as well for opiate abuse.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know what his specific diagnosis was at, say, like the ketamine clinic. Although to be honest, I don't think you need anyone in particular because again, off-label prescribing means the physician can they're giving it to you for an indication that's not FDA approved. So
Yeah.
as an example, right now there are some trials going on for the use of IV infusion ketamine for things like depression, things like anxiety. And it's not to say that there isn't any positive potential impact there. It's very early on, and it also requires very regular visits. And again, not to go too deep into the evidence around that, but there's some evidence around that particular part. However, what then it turns into, right, is this question of, well, who should we prescribe this to, right? Is this someone, if someone say has a history of an addiction to ketamine, are they indicated for this right now? What does it mean then also when someone then clearly is going outside the lines, right? Like this wasn't just even him ordering from some online source and kind of like we'll
Yeah.
call it doctor shopping, if you will, right? Where you're getting things from different sources. This was straight up like going to a drug dealer, people clearly doing things that's illegal behavior. But then there's also the aspect of he nor anybody else thought that they could talk about it. Something that occurs to me that comes up, I'll give you guys the link to this for the show notes. But Dax Shepard did a podcast. Gosh, it must have been like 3 or 4 years ago now. He's got a podcast called Armchair Expert, but he did an
Yeah.
episode about a relapse that he had because he had, he's very openly in recovery from alcoholism, but he got
Yep.
addicted to opioids for a little while there. I don't know if you guys heard this podcast. It's really
Yeah.
powerful. Um, but he was talking about how he was so ashamed. He had all that shame and stigma that he was hiding it, even when he knew. For a while, he was fooling himself, but at a certain point, he knew what was going on. But he felt like he couldn't be honest with his audience. He felt like he couldn't be honest with his family because he built up this image. It's like, I am this person in recovery. I've been in recovery for so long. But what was so interesting about that podcast in particular, when he really was public with everybody, previously come out to his family about what had been going on, and got back into recovery, was that no one was angry at him. No one shamed him. Everyone
Yeah.
talked about his courageousness, was there for him, wanted to help pick him up because they understand that addiction is a problem that's relapsing and remitting, right?
Yeah.
It waxes and wanes. You can have this happen. Where it gets dangerous though is when you try to hide it. When you go back to the lying, when you go back to feeling like I can't talk about it. And I think that this isn't to say this is on Matthew Perry. I think it's on all of us though, to this question of like what could anyone have done something different to make it feel like a
Mm-hmm.
safer place where he can say, you know what, I'm a recovery champion, but this is something that's happening to me right now and I need help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, just alone in general, it is hard to ask for help being an addict or someone in active addiction. It is absolutely hard to ask for help, and sometimes you don't even know you need help. But there's this stigma that society has placed on addiction, and it prevents people from asking for help. And I couldn't agree with you more. That is a very, very good point, Dr. Weiner.
Hmm. Yeah.
That,
And it's challenging, right? Because everyone else in that system, their profit incentive was to hide it, was to enable, was to
mm-hmm.
promote, right? The assistant, like, of course, yeah, you're gonna go to jail if it comes out that you were buying, you're party to this. So then all of a sudden you're culpable, you get sucked in, but it's tough, right? Because that kind of leaves it to someone trapped in an addiction to be the one to step out and say I'm struggling, and that's hard enough to do. Much less
Yeah.
if we feel like if someone feels like they're going to be punished or they're going to lose in some way if they were to
Mm-hmm.
commit backwards, right? Like if they come out and they talk about it, they are going to win from that. They're going to get support. They're going to be alive, perhaps in Matthew Perry's case. But it feels like they have everything to lose by being honest, when it's actually
Mm-hmm.
the other way around.
So
Agreed.
do you think that if he were to have tried to express help, actually, I don't know how to word this question that was in my head. I apologize. I'm going to word it differently. So give me a second on that question. But can we, while I try and word that question, can we expand a little bit more on the stigma and people trying to ask for help and how it's counterintuitive? Like someone asking for help, or if they can ask for help, how does that
I mean,
affect someone?
I think it comes with it just comes with like, I think me personally, I think I mean, I'm not in substance abuse and I'm not in recovery, but I'm just trying to see it from somebody from somebody else's eyes where there's a sense of embarrassment, right? Like,
Yeah.
where you you are voicing that you are not strong enough or you are not well enough to handle something on your own. So mentally, growing up, we all have been embarrassed at some point in time, or we've got skeletons, and so you just kind of that kind of follows you. So it's more of, and I think it's accelerated when you have a following, when you're a celebrity, when you have millions of people who know you, who you are, but now you are not strong enough to tackle this issue that is an issue. And if you come out, then you're just not, you let everybody down. And so that's where they just,
Yeah.
I think it's more of an embarrassment type thing where they feel like they're not strong enough to be that figure of light for all their followers. That's just me.
So Matt, I'm glad you brought that up because now I kind of have the path that I wanted to take, and it plays into that. So, and Dr. Weiner, this is what I wanted to direct to you: is him being a celebrity. Do you think that had any bearing on him being more afraid to come out and say he needed help? Do you think that played a role in him trying to keep it quiet because he didn't want to lose the fame, or he didn't want his fans to look down on him? Sorry, that was the route I wanted to go the first place.
Yeah. So I am not a famous individual, so I can't speak to what
You're
it's like to
pretty
be in
famous
that.
in our book, Doc. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
put
I
that
don't
out
know
there.
about that. We get
Yeah.
a lot of views when you come on.
Well, that's very kind of you, but I'm just trying to say, like, I don't know what it's like to be a Matthew Perry. I don't know, but I can only imagine that when you have that many eyeballs and that many people and that much news, I'm just thinking about another person who's been very courageous about his recovery journey, John Mulaney, right? Everyone knows when he went to rehab because it's plastered all over the paper, and so I'd imagine there's this additional level of scrutiny. I think though that there's so many layers of tragedy around what happened with Matthew Perry, but something that's really sticking out to me right now is that it's just so striking to me about that stigma, that lack of being feeling like you can speak out. Him saying, "I have relapsed on ketamine," is not him being a hypocrite because he's a recovery champion. It's him being a human being. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make you a
Yeah.
hypocrite, it makes you a human. And I think that sometimes we think that to be a role model, we have to be Superman, we have to be
Yep.
perfect, or we have to have like a story
Yeah.
arc that doesn't involve like the Empire Strikes Back, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
things go bad and Han gets frozen in carbonite or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't have dips. But that's honestly how recovery tends to work. And I think some of the strongest stories are the ones where people are legitimately full-fledged, real human beings who struggle and work hard and ideally come out on top. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
they're human. And I don't think anyone would would have thought any less of Matthew Perry had he felt like he could reach out for the help that clearly was so valuable to him the first time. But
Agreed.
something happened in there where he felt like he
Agreed.
had to
Yeah.
hide again.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I agree. I don't think there's very many one chip wonders out there. And this term, I don't really like using it exactly the way I'm going to say it, but relapse is a part of recovery. Most of the time, you're gonna go through it, you're gonna experience it, and it didn't take anything from you. You still were clean that long. You still went through the steps to get there. It's just you fell down. You got to get back up.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. That was probably a big speed bump in his way. Is he didn't want to be looked down on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
Well, and
you know,
that's part of why. No, please go ahead. Sorry.
I just think it's such a sad story, because at that point in whatever he was going through in life, he was, you know, near his lowest point, right? And he's going through it, and he feels like there's no way out, and so many people are bottom feeding off of him, right? And it had to be incredibly just a dark place for him, and it's really sad because he was so talented. I've seen several of his movies, and obviously I've seen the TV show, and he was just such a light, and it's just, you feel bad for somebody like that. And we're talking about him, and you mentioned it earlier, there's hundreds and thousands of people that go through what he's going through that aren't famous, that aren't celebrities, and don't get any acknowledgement, and they're going through that same dark tunnel or that dark place. And it's really sad.
And let me put out there too, like again, this New York Times article, we should put that in the show notes too. People should read this. They're talking about how the drug dealer like gave like 25 ketamine lollipops as a bonus. She didn't just have 25 ketamine lollipops for Matthew Perry. There's probably hundreds or thousands of those lollipops.
Yeah.
They're going to a lot of other people. You know what I'm saying? A lot of other people.
Yes.
This is not just a Matthew Perry problem, and I think that's, if there's a message to take from this, and part of why I'm so passionate about speaking out on it is that this is, there's no perfect solution to the problem, but this occurred because of social factors, and this occurred, in my opinion, because of regulatory factors. And
Yep.
there's things that we collectively can do about both of those. And it's not going to save
Yeah.
every death. It's not going to save every case of addiction, but if it can save somebody, we got to do it. We got
Yep.
to do it.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I absolutely agree. And when you get your name, the ketamine queen, such as the person that was supplying it to Matthew Perry, I mean, you got to kind of see that there's an issue there.
She's about to be dethroned, so
Yeah.
there you go. Doc, we know you got patience to see. Thanks for jumping on this quick episode. You are an absolute gem, and we value you as a guest and as a friend of the show. And we can't wait to have you back on next time with Dr. Foti for that second part. But, for you to lend your time in such a manner really quickly so we could talk about this breaking story that just happened yesterday is pretty awesome. And kudos to you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Weiner. And to the listeners, we will see you next week.
Till next week, guys. Take care.